Our links to yesterday and tomorrow depend also on the aesthetic, emotional, and symbolic aspects of human life, on saga, play, and celebration. Without festival and fantasy, man would not really be a historical being at all. There you go. Have to bring those in. Organizations without a rich symbolic life become empty and sterile. Without ritual and ceremony, transitions remain incomplete. A clutter of comings and goings. Life becomes an endless set of Wednesdays. So they give life to the organization. They add the emotions, they add the imagination, they give closure, they add future, they bring all that together in there. And when it comes to leaders and followers, guess what? They are always involved in that interconnection between symbols, stories, and rituals. Always there. Always there. So you have the wine and the bread, the symbols. You have the stories from Jesus clear back to the Passover. And you have the ritual as often as you do this. And leaders and followers are always involved in the symbolic frame that's there. And the big question is then, what does the symbolic frame reveal about Interact? The vision statements and beyond. We'll leave that rhetorical. All right, there we go. There's a little critter. All right, let's close the book off, and the last part of the book goes into trying to integrate the four frames and show the interrelationship. So we'll review those, and this is key, I think, recognizing that integrative role, that symbols go back to structure, because structure gets into status and role, you know, and it goes back into HR, how you treat people and all this stuff. So it's all interrelated. It's political because there's limited resources. And so getting into the reframing, choosing to view the same thing from more than one perspective. And so we got to see the artwork of the four parts now all blended together into one big picture. And if we can do that, and if it can be done for Interact, then you've got the opportunity basically to talk to everybody within that organization. If you can do that, everybody will get to hear from their perspective, their favorites, one or two frames. They'll get to hear it from there, and then they'll feel like they've been talked to. They've been talked to. On the structural view then, the metaphor they use is a complex machine, the structure, a big complex machine. And leaders, they become analysts, they become architects, and the followers, of course, are just kind of following right along in whatever the leaders do on that. And the strategy then, do your homework, you got to analyze. These are the leaders like to have lots of statistics that they can look at and analyze and figure out what's going on and how they're going to strategize and implement what they want to implement. So the focus is going to be a lot on the data and the logic of using structure then to get what they want to get at the other end and making plans to accomplish that. So that's the structure of you. On the human resources, the metaphor for that is an extended family. And the leaders and followers, here you get more evened out. Leaders can be catalysts, facilitators, and moving down to that, and servants, and then followers, kind of the same thing. They have kind of the roles are a lot closer together there. Change the strategy. How do you do that? Build relationships. There's the ear gate they're listening to each other so that it can be a fit between the two. Educate each other, be open, and empower. So those are the things of making the fit of the organization and with the people that are working within it there. Focus is on skills, attitudes, teamwork, and communication. Communication being the big one there. If that human relations is going to work, then there's got to be all kinds of communication going down and listening back and forth, and then compromising, negotiating, and all that kind of stuff to make it happen. Political view, I love that metaphor. It's a jungle out there. And leaders and followers, you advocate, you negotiate, you compromise, you do all those kind of things. And the change strategy then, you better know the terrain, you better know who's in the groups within the terrain, right? And hopefully you can create the agenda, you network, you get your network built up. The more you can build it up, the more powerful you can become. Diffuse opposition, negotiate, compromise, all those are the key terms to bring change there. Focus then is to build a power base, get access, influence the key players, and get the decisions made in the way you want them made. Win the limited resources. That's the name of the game. The symbolic side, so the metaphor there is the theater, is a temple, and then the leaders and followers more the prophets and poets. Change strategy, you reframe. Use self as symbol, stage rituals and ceremonies, tell stories, create drama. And then the focus will be on the meaning, belief, and faith. So, quick overview of the four, and now integrating them together. Their environment is never passive or neutral. Never passive or neutral. Structure, okay? You reach the goal through arrangement. Human relations is productivity through people. The political side, you win those scarce resources. Symbolic side, there's your emotional side coming in and interpreting it through that emotional gate. But they're all tied together. So we're bringing the three little puzzles onto the fourth, and we're going to integrate them, bring them all together. What are the risks for the frames? The structure, you overestimate the power of authority. You underestimate the authority of power. On the human resources side, too optimistic about integrating the individual and the organizational needs. So in other words, almost where the first one has a too low a view of people, the second one may have too high a view of people, and both will get you into trouble on that. And it also then neglects the power of the structure and the conflict. It's going to neglect basically the other three. Each one of those are going to do that. On the political side then, it reinforces conflict and mistrust while sacrificing opportunities for rational discourse, collaboration, and hope. So yeah, that's where the tensions are always there. And they're in any organization. Every day, year-round, there's tension because of the limited resources, who gets what. Symbols then can be very vague, they can be very elusive, ambiguous, right? So that's the problem. So what the authors argue then, okay, super. So what the authors are arguing then, that we have to become very proficient in being multi-framed. Single-frame presidents tended to be less experienced and relied mainly on the structural or the human resource perspectives. Presidents who relied solely on the structural frame were particularly likely to be seen as ineffective leaders. So we've got to be on move from the rifle to the shotgun, so you can scatter the pattern out there and be bigger that way. Created a new word here. If there's hierarchy, there's got to be lowarchy, right? So we coined a new term. We've got two new terms now: servant followership and lowarchy. Okay. Heroic images of leadership convey the notion of a one-way process. Leaders lead and followers follow. This view blinds us to the reality of a relationship between leaders and their followers. Leaders are not independent actors. They both shape and are shaped by their constituents, both of them, both sides. Hoarding power produces a powerless organization. People stripped of power look for ways to fight back. Sabotage, passive resistance, withdrawal, or angry militancy. Giving power liberates energy for more productive use.
She's chewing. It's chewing things.
That's okay. All right. So, back to Kelly's definitions of the follower here, and this is taken in a very negative way here, of those who are stripped of their power lose it, and can retaliate in many, many different ways of doing that. Okay. Single focus leadership, what does it miss? Leadership is thus a process of mutual influence, fusing thought, feeling, and action to produce cooperative effort in the service of purposes and values of both the leader and the led. Single frame managers are unlikely to understand and attend to the intricacies of a holistic process. So somehow they have to be capable to take that glasses and look at all four of those frames and then multiply them, bringing them together in just getting out of the comfort zone of your first or second choice. Can you get it up to 3? And if you can get it up to 4, then we're going somewhere. And then everybody feels like that they have been addressed, they have been talked to. So that's kind of the message of Bowman and Deal. Know the 4 and be able to use them, which raises the interesting question, how should then the 4 frames speak into interact? So we better see the 4 frames in your presentations. They should be speaking into there somehow. Should be do that. Okay, here's your quiz for today. This could be worth an A. All right. You're very familiar with all 4 of them now. Which frame is the start point for a review? If you're going to start somewhere, which one do you start with? 4 choices. You have a 1/4 of a 25% chance of winning this one. Where would you start? Which one of these interact? Which one are you going to start with?
Symbolic.
That's an African perspective now.
And I would also say it depends on the problem.
Okay.
So that's how I put it.
Yeah.
But primarily I would start with the symbols.
Yeah.
Because that's where we want to go. So everything
Ah.
that's happening
Okay.
is in relation to that. So I would go back to that.
So everything's interrelated to where you're going. So that's why you would go to that frame first.
So this is in regards to interact?
Or anything, yeah, but I mean that would be our application, yeah.
I think I would start with symbols as well, I think, just because you can have a structure, but people don't usually, they're going to get by, if you are calling from nothing, people don't get behind a structure.
Okay.
People getting around themselves, usually that's a little bit tricky since we have all of those political things going on within people. But if you have a neutral, not a person, symbol behind which people can rally, then you can build a structure, you can tell people, you can build those relationships
Okay.
where you need to go, and you can kind of frame the political as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well put. Amos don't buy this at all.
No. Not at all, but I don't know if it's the most effective way for me to go about it, but I do know that instinctively I immediately want to start with a structure.
Okay.
Because I want to figure out, hey, what is this organization trying to do or trying to accomplish? What are its goals?
Okay.
And then once I figure that out, then I instinctively want to use the other three to achieve that.
Okay. Yeah.
So to me, it seems instinctively obvious to go there, but I don't know if that's just because I'm so skewed.
So skewed. So, Mahela, what are you going to do? Where are you going to start?
I don't know, I want to go towards the political stuff.
Oh, you're going right in the teeth of the.
If you recognize, I mean, anything that you're gonna do and in regards to interactive, there is limited resources. So if we're gonna look at them, they did have limited personnel, but yet they expanded to all these places. And I don't think that was very wise.
Okay.
Because now all those people are basically on their own. So focusing to build the power base, like getting that, this is where we are and this is our base and we're gonna extend, but only to so many things based on what we have. And they have a follower, but there seems to be no follower, and they really didn't have an agenda. Everything kept changing. I would start and kind of remix the political, and then everything else. I think once you establish what exactly you want to do, and everything else falls, like your structure and people and everything just goes into place. That's the way I see it.
Okay, Grace, are you going to take us to human relations? So we get them all?
Yeah, I want to do structure. Yeah,
Oh, you want to go to structure?
Yeah, I totally
Oh,
do
see,
it.
she's buys. Okay, she's the structure girl. There we go. Who's going to HR? Anybody?
No. In a sense, yeah, I think what I started to do was to see it from a symbolic point of view first.
Yeah.
I think that's why I actually did.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why is because I started looking at the history, the stories,
Okay.
and I was looking for the PowerPoint, seeing if those stories seem to fit seeing if the stories, the experiences, I should say, fit the vision, the stated vision.
Yeah.
And because to me that the symbols is what people probably hold most
Yeah.
dearly to,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they don't know it because it's ambiguous. They
Mhm.
just don't know it. And I think the structure was supposed to kind of come out of that. The goals, I don't know if the structure comes out of it, but because the funny thing about this, I don't want to give too much away, but basically just the first thing they did was create, from the time they had lemonade at someone's house to start brainstorming ideas for this organization, it
Mhm.
seemed like they created a structure very quickly. Within weeks,
Mm-hmm.
they created a governance or some kind of something. And so,
Which is interesting for a bunch of independents.
yeah, it was very interesting because it's not what I would have done. It's what I would not have naturally done.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to look at it symbolically through the stories, and it was really a stretch for me to read through all the stories because, quite frankly, they're a little bit boring. I'm sorry if they're friends of yours.
I don't know them, so you're right.
But I think that, I got some things out of that, but
Mhm.
I think I did approach it more symbolically
Yeah.
at first.
Yeah. And that's a good way to find out where did you really start in your thinking of the whole process.
Right.
Yeah. That'll tell you
What y'all would naturally do, right?
yeah, what you really did there, yeah. Okay, Susanna, where are you
I
go?
really feel sorry for Ivan because I almost came to tear when I read those stories.
This is just the male-female thing here. See, it's just like male. They're just
I'm just harmless.
You're seeing more than the stories. Ivan is just only
Go ahead, Susanna.
Yeah, I was looking for the symbol also.
Okay.
Actually, when I look at it, the most appealing to me is a symbol.
Okay.
That actually they were drawn together because of the vision that they have. They have a heart for Alaska.
Hmm.
Actually,
Yeah.
one of them even say, "Why do we need this engine to help us to work? Because we're working fine."
Hmm.
And so it's when I look at it, I'm thinking, yeah, it's first the symbol comes, then the structure. But the structure is telling me that they're not very structured. Because it's simple. The structure is easy for me to look at what is there and what's not there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to look at it. Human relation, you have to go deeper when they come together and see how
Mm.
they interact and what's the dynamic. Very little of political.
I'm sorry?
Very
Little
little
political.
political frame that, so far. 'Cause I read all the history
Mm.
on it, so.
What I found is that it's difficult to unearth the politics that's going on. The realities of the chaotic world in this organization, very difficult to
Mhm.
unearth.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes me more curious as to what really is going on. So tell us, Dr. Smith.
I might give you some clues later on,
Okay,
huh?
thank
Yeah. After you're done. Yeah.
Oh.
We'll keep the mystery. Story is mystery, right? So we need to keep a little mystery going here before we get to the conclusion. Yeah.
This doesn't tell me what really is going on. That's why I'm sorry. That's why the stories didn't bring tears to my eyes.
Uh-huh.
I think it would have brought tears to my eyes if I found out that that someone would actually took money away, withheld their payment or withheld their offering or tithe or whatever,
Uh-huh.
because someone made a decision here, someone made it. I don't see anything.
You see it on
Negative.
the Exodus of the attrition.
I see it on the actual on the stats.
Yeah.
On the stat sheet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you don't have some stories to correlate with some of that. Yeah. Yeah. Those are the stories you don't tell, see. Yeah. You got to keep, kind of a nice picture out there for the public, so don't want too many of those getting out. Although I'll show you one or two of those.
That's true. I'm sure you couldn't have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so.
If this organization was completely declassified,
Yeah, we
I
would.
would be able to see those things.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
This is an argon right there.
Okay, so you should be able to start at any one and get to where you're going. My preference too, I think my start point would be the symbolic one. I think you guys are right over here. So this whole row was pretty much, yeah. Of course, they got together before class and drew that conclusion, but yeah.
John was improving.
I would wonder where John would start. Too bad he's not here. We'll have to find out. We'll find out later when he gets back. All right, so there we are. Same old thing. The leaders, the followers, everybody has power. All played out, though, in the bigger drama of the cosmic drama between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of Satan. And then how it's played out, who takes what roles and where you end up, whether you serve or you're serve yourself or serve Satan or serve others, There it is. So, and then we're going to put it all together, right? And then we're going to move now into the regimes, the slavery, the anarchy, the equity, and the hierarchy. And then you're going to find some metaphors for what it was like and then what you want it to become. All right, so let me kick out of here and we'll get into Wildowski. Okay, Moses, the reluctant political leader. How many of you thought of Moses as a political leader before reading Wildowski?
A little bit.
A little bit. Well, you are different, so Ivan, you. What?
The word political itself is problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the key term is like political. What does that mean? And it can be very pejorative.
Because in Uganda, to say that Moses is a political leader, the insinuation is that pastors or church leaders are political leaders.
That's the implication.
And that would bring them into big trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the word political
Mm-hmm.
is the problem.
Yeah. Well stated. Well, we're going to define Wildowski's model, and then look at its strengths and weaknesses, because every model that's presented will have its strengths and weaknesses. And then, of course, we're going to apply that model to interact as well. And then you'll do the whole thing again at the end of the class to do it on the organization of your choice. All right. Moses has a few challenges before him. And Yahweh is going to challenge him a little bit. Moses, all you got to do is go to the Pharaoh and convince him to let the Israelites go. That's all you got to do. That's one thing. And then you've got to convince Israel that they need to leave Egypt as well. That's no small task, man, when you think about that. Put yourself in Moses' sandals. And all of a sudden God tells you, I want you to go to the Pharaoh, convince him to let him go. And then I want you to go to the Israelites and convince them to go. And hey, by the way, you need to become the willing leader to do this, to take them out of the land. Wow. Tough assignment given to Moses there. And, we need to let that soak in to what is being required of him, the task that has been laid on his lap to take up and to do this. Wildowski, we'll look at him as the individual there. He's now, he died a number of years ago. He's a kind of a believing Jew. His father was more of a secular Jew. He taught at Berkeley, was up there, and he didn't really take part in a lot of the student marches and so forth on the universities and that kind of stuff during that era, kind of stayed clear of that. But he was a friend of Mary Douglas, and they actually, and of course Mary Douglas is the group Grid Gal, right? That's where a lot of that came from. So she's putting it together, but he and her came up with the book Risk and Culture there. So he's been playing with this group grid thing for a number of years while he was there at Berkeley and on. So later on then he would publish that book, The Nursing Father. And in that translation really comes out of his favorite Bible translation, which was the King James Version. That was what he really preferred, that version of it. Let's see, what else about him do we need to know? When the book then went out of print, is actually a really nice colored cover on it beforehand. And so I wanted to keep using it as a textbook. So I don't remember how I did it. I was able to get a hold of his wife and ask her for permission to use the book. And she granted it. She was just say, great, he would love it if it was continued to be used. Use it. So we were able to make copies of it and use it, and then eventually then it was republished and looking like this book here, The Nursing Father there. So he was in the whole area of political science. That's where his field was in teaching there. He was a contemporary with Robert Alter there, who wrote the classic, The Art of Biblical Narrative. We'll talk about that in the narrative class there. So anyway, that's enough. It gives you a little background on Wildowski himself. Interesting individual. Sherwood Lingenfelter, of course, was the provost here for a number of years, and before that on the faculty here at the School of Intercultural Studies. He was actually my mentor for my dissertation. And he had read Mary Douglas, of course, and that's where he will come up with the book Transforming Culture and bringing that whole grid group into his writings there. But Mary Douglas, of course, was the one that was influencing him on that. What's really interesting and a good cautionary tale is that he didn't discover Wildowski until after that book was written, which for you who are doing your doctoral dissertations, that's what you want to try to avoid. You got to know who are the major players out there in that arena, and Wildowski was one of them with Mary Douglas, but he missed that in his research. And in the revision, then he found the book, and the revision has him in there. So probably today you wouldn't see that it was missing in the bibliography. But that's a great cautionary tale, is to know who are the big players that are in the arena here that you're discussing in your dissertation. Lingenfelter would see these things as a way of analyzing culture. That's how he would look at it, and basically following Mary Douglas and Wildowski as well. He has a little different definition of culture. In contrast, say if you contrast Chuck Kraft will see culture as a very neutral thing, not good or bad. It's how you use that culture which will determine whether it's evil or good. This is where theories come into play here. The anthropological theory that all the missiologists that started, like at Fuller and here, were basically structural functionalists. So what they were looking for is similarities within the cultures. This is like that. This is like that. So so they take off your shoes, you take off your shoes. You know, it's not that, I'm being simplistic here. But the idea is you're looking for things that are the same and correlations like that. While I was a student here, Sherwood Lingenfelter went through I call it an anthropological conversion, and he became a conflict theorist. So now, instead of looking for commonalities, you look for opposites. And therefore, these are opposing things within culture. And for him, and he tied it to Romans 11:32 here, he calls them a prison of disobedience. So he would see that culture is contaminated, in contrast to Kraft, who would see culture as neutral. Just two variations of it. Maybe they're both right, and maybe they're both wrong. Maybe they're both are similar, but they're also could be opposing as well. And I think really when you look at trying to put the whole thing together, yeah, it will have similarities, but it'll also have oppositional matters within it as well. So anyway, just to alert you to that. there's your 2 books. So the Transforming Culture, we'll look at those various things there. And for both of them, but these are ways of life. And they talk about social games that are going to be played here. These are patterns of social and interpersonal relationships. So how do these relationships work? And these are what they call social games then that are played out. They also talk about cultural biases. These are patterns, and using bias here not in a negative way, but just that each one of us comes with biases, right? It's there because we've been socialized into things, and those are our biases. It's not necessarily good or bad at this point. It's just that we have been socialized into this, and they become us. So they call them, Lingenfelter will call them cultural biases, patterns of shared values, beliefs, and behaviors. The terminology that's used is a little different here when you compare the two, how each one of them use different terminologies. So Lingenfelter's would be on bureaucratic. We'll start up in the yellow up there in 3. Bureaucratic, whereas a little harsher, slavery. You know, I mean, it's pretty much in your face there. Then we go to individualistic versus anarchy. And then you go to equity versus collectivist. Then you go to corporate versus hierarchy. So the terminology is a little stronger. And, well, yeah, I guess that. Lingenfelter kind of softened the terminology there a little bit. Within this group grid thing here, then power is going to flow in certain directions. It's always going to flow in certain directions. So within the bureaucracy thing, it's going to be a top-down. The pharaoh is going to tell people what's going to happen here, right? He can be advised, but he's going to make the end decision. Anarchy, who knows who's making decisions? Everybody does what's right in their own eyes at that point. Equity and collectivist, anybody can. It's a first among equals. So power is being distributed, you know, in multiple directions. In the hierarchy side, it kind of tends to go top down, but it can also go bottom up somewhat. So there's a little more, in contrast to bureaucracy on the other side, there is no chance it's going to come from bottom up. But in this side, it has an opportunity at least to go up the chain of command as well as come down the chain of command. Let's see here where we want to go on that. Okay, let's do this one here, the grid group, and then take one more, and we'll take a break here. Key terms, the grid. Then that's if you just do the yellow there, the dimension of individualism. That helps. It kind of summarizes it very succinctly. And the group is the dimension of social incorporation. So it's the individual versus the corporate, basically, is what we're talking about here. And then for regime, which is Wildowski's term, of course, he's talking about political cultures, the shared values justifying the political practices that uphold different ways of life. And Lingenfelter will talk about the rules of the game. And he talks about social environments then, where these rules are played out. And then he's defined a number of different categories in which they are played out. Interestingly, I forget if I mentioned this, I'll just mention it again briefly, that when he was doing this book, he was actually, teaching here, and he would write a chapter for the next week for class. So that's how it got banged out. And then the class would give him interaction, of course, which gave him feedback, and then he could do revision, etc. But as he was going through that, I noticed he had no category for religion. And so I challenged him on that a little bit. I said, you know what, man, I mean, if you don't cover religion, that's kind of like central here, And he didn't like it in the beginning, but finally we he got a chapter on the religion side of it, which is very, very important there to incorporate that in there. Because the political, one of the points that Wildowski is going to make, that religion is often the center for political power and plays a major role. I mean, I think of the Catholic Church in the Philippines, okay, or Islam. You know, though religions, and that's one of Wildowski's arguments, that that is very much connected to power and the political side of it. So anyway, those are the things that he, some of the definitions, and you'll become very familiar with them as we go through it. And then for the grid side, then high grid versus low grid, high number of social distinctions, highly defined social expectations, role defines the person, leadership roles are honored, leadership roles are few, each person occupies a niche. And then on the low grid, few social distinctions, leadership is open to ambiguous and skilled. Leaders are best among equals, and unique value of the individual, and the person is known for life history and character. So there we have kind of the hierarchy versus the flat. On the group side, the high group then will be economic transactions are relational, group life is longer than the individual, relationships have social meaning, and the goal is to perpetuate the group. That's the idea there. And on the low group side, cooperation is instrumental, groups are temporary, allegiance fluctuates with the changing individual need, much like the period of the judges, much like that period.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.